Good morning and welcome. I am so glad to be on with the both of you who are creative powerhouses with wonderful vision to talk about this new amazing book that's coming out about the Theology and Prince. So my name is Suzanne Castle and I'm on with Jonathan Harwell and Katrina Jenkins, who have edited this wonderful volume of work that kind of talks about the intersection of the music and the message of Prince, who he was, and how that has a theological bent to it, and I'm really excited. Thank you so much for giving me time this morning.
Thank you for having us.
So I wanted, it's a kind of a unique project to be a part of, and thank you for asking me to be a part of it as well. And I find myself a little humbled being in the space with a lot of theologians, of which I do not count myself as one of those because I work in practical liturgical theology. And so tell me a little bit about what the nugget of inspiration was for this project.
I originally came across this call for volumes for a new book series that was starting called Theology and Pop Culture from Lexington and Fortress Academic, which is part of Roman and Littlefield. And I had already been looking for a way to sort of expand my research parameters beyond what I was already doing in anthropology and library studies. I'd already been publishing a few reviews of books on Prince lately in scholarly journals, so I started mulling over this crazy idea of maybe proposing a volume on theology and Prince. It seemed to make perfect sense because, you know, we'd already been having conferences where people were doing related sessions. We'd already had some work out of the seminary, the United Seminary in the Twin Cities, who was working on a project that I contributed some poetry to. And so I touched base with Katrina because she's got the real theological chops here, right? And so I learned that she actually knows, she probably knows even more about Prince than I do, as I learned. So I'm so glad to have her expertise on this.
I think, and I wrote a little bit about this in the forward. So when Jonathan came to me, I was like, oh, this is really cool. All things Prince and theology. We could do this. And so I remember he came and said, he called and said, hey, I got this thing across my desk, some information. Would you be interested in being a co-editor? And I was like, at that time I was like, I don't know what that really means because I've never published anything, but that's okay. And I said, yeah, you go write it up and everything. Never my wildest dreams did I think we would be sitting here today. Right. So it's been quite a journey.
So yeah, so they accepted the proposal, long story short, as the inaugural volume in the series. And so now they've got, I think, 30 other volumes already lined up. Everything from Star Trek, Star Wars, Stanley Kubrick, Black Panther. The Marvel Universe will come out the same day as ours does. And so there's a website, popularcultureandtheology.com, where they list all the volumes about the series. They have weekly blogs that I'm helping to edit now.
Well, if I can put a plug in for Depeche Mode, since they're, you know, hopefully going to be in the Hall of Fame, like that's my wheelhouse is actually Depeche Mode.
Next volume yourself.
There you go. There you go. So you told me a little bit about the research that you do, and how long did you think about the research as far as how the different authors were going to intersect with each other, the different kind of maybe theological questions around this project? So how long did you anticipate the whole project taking?
We really know. I thought a year, maybe more. Right. I mean, I think that was the kind of the interesting things because this was like our first attempt to even enter into something as large as this. So we weren't really sure about, first of all, I think we were praying we would get people who would be interested enough to say, let us submit things. I mean, that was one of our first things, like, okay, please, somebody. We know there are a lot of Prince fans out there. I mean, right? Tons and tons and tons around the world. But, you know, it's a very specific kind of topic, you know, with theology. So when you throw the theology in, some people back off and say, oh, wait a minute. And people ask, did Prince really have a theological life? Because if you look at the genre of all his music, right, there were some questions about that. But we know that he was, you know, a seeker and always basically looking at other faiths and very, very, you know, open to seeing where he would land. And, you know, and as we know, he did, right, as a Jehovah's Witness. So, yeah, we weren't quite sure what to expect. I think we were just like, okay, they gave us a schedule, like put out a call for papers. And then when we got people, we're like, oh, we have people who are interested. And then it was like selecting and going through. And we tried to collaborate and talk about what seemed to fit, because that's important, like what flowed. what would
Right.
flow in the book. And so we read over everything really carefully and came up with all of our authors. So
Yeah, and we got some really amazing proposals that
did.
we had to, you know, pick and choose because we got so many good ones. And as you might expect, some of them were along similar lines. So we had to
Right.
be careful about not duplicating efforts. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of people, for example, were really interested in eschatology. So we
Ah,
had to focus
yes.
on one chapter for eschatology,
Right.
not have the whole book about that, because that was deep in lyrics.
Yeah, you know, even this morning I was listening to Get on the Boat, which was
Yeah.
part of his, you know, kind of Jehovah. I'm just exploring what it means to be Jehovah Witness, and
Yes,
gosh, that
yes,
amazing funk sax line that like
yes,
runs through that song is so catchy and amazing.
yes.
But so you're right, so much of how he elevates his story is through an eschatological lens, and so
Mhm.
I would think that that might be one of the kind of narratives that might run through all of the chapters, because I think it's hard to separate the eschatology from Prince.
It is.
So is there one golden line that you see from the very beginning of the book to the end of the book?
Good question.
Good question. You know, I think what really shines forth is the love of Prince. That's the first thing. And how he's multidimensional. I think that's the one thing, because if you look at all the chapters in the body of the book, I mean, it really touches upon those things that you wouldn't normally think about, because, right, we listen to the music, but there's so many layers of Prince. Like, so you can't, I know sometimes I listen to one thing, I'm like, wait a minute, kind of like scripture with me. You look at it and you read it once, and then you read it 10 times, and sometimes on that last time you're like, oh, I never saw that before.
Right.
So I think that's what, there were so many aspects of Prince. It just reminded me how deep they were.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of transgressing boundaries, which we always think of with him, right? Because
Right.
not just musically, of course, but also spiritually, in terms of race, in terms of gender, you name it. That's probably one common thread that's running through all these chapters, is how he was boundless in everything he did, and that was intentional. He was always so focused on not being in anybody's box.
I remember when he first came out with Purple Rain, right? And his fashion, like the curly hair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, with, you know, the raincoat, even before that, right? I mean, he challenged people's assumptions. Like some, you know, some people I've read said he put on makeup or his eye makeup better than most, you know, most women did, you know,
Right.
in terms of just in general. So I think he did, as Jonathan said, transcended so much. You know, what we least would expect, sometimes he would just throw it in your face and say, okay, now you deal with it, you know, and have that conversation. And you know, if you looked at how he could be sometimes, it's like, well, okay, you know, you can have that conversation and maybe I'll join you sometimes and maybe my music will do that. But I think he and also when I think about Dick Clark, right, I used to watch American Bandstand and his first interview, and I remember just as a kid laughing because, right, a lot of people would be like, yes, I have my hit record, I want to talk to Dick Clark, I want to like get my things up. And he kind of just looked at him like, yeah, okay. And yes, he was shy, granted, right? That was always one of his things. But he wasn't that person who was just going to do this meet and greet all the time.
Right.
You know, it wasn't going to be business as usual. So
Yeah, I think he definitely set that up from the get-go, is here's who I am and how I'm going to stand in the world. And you can enter my circle or not, or you can stand and watch, you know, or you know, both at different times in your lives. And I think that was one of his, you know, I think about like Annie Lennox and David Bowie, and there was kind of this chunk in kind of the musical timeline of people that were really doing some very interesting identity bending kind of things. And,
very fluid. I say there's so much, you know, they were just so fluid in their aspects of music. So.
Absolutely. So someone buys this book, and it is kind of structured as an academic kind of tome. And so someone picks up this book that's maybe not an academic. What would your hope be as they, you know, plow through it?
I think overall, our hope is that we're doing justice to Prince, right? But for the readers themselves, you know, we were really focused on doing a scholarly book, but hopefully mostly jargon-free, so that the general reader would get a lot out of it. It wouldn't be a high barrier of entry for them to understand what's being talked about. Some of the chapters are a little more academic in tone than others, but still we try to make sure that it's all readable and all very understandable to a general.
And I agree with that. And while I am in that theology world, I will admit that I'm more of that practical theology person. Like, I did my divinity degree, right? And so there are the folks who are really into really breaking down all aspects of theology. And being on a college campus, I think I've just kind of learned more of dealing with practical theology, but still giving the students, right, the background and the foundation. I think what's great about this book is, like, there's just so, I feel like my students could pick it up even not knowing about Prince, and not, believe it or not all students do, but that they could read and get a glimpse of, or at least understanding of who he is without going into the, oh my goodness, there are portions of this that I can't understand because I don't have that background of either Prince or theology.
Right.
So
I ran the book draft by a colleague who is, not versed in theology at all. And she sat down to read it. She said she read it all night long and didn't put it. And she actually contributed one of these statements from the back of the book cover because she was so entranced with it. So she found it really helpful and just really entertaining, but also really, she said she laughed, she cried, she really, and she's now a theologian.
So thinking about that, I working on this project, and I'm so anxious to read everyone else's work, and tried not to do that, but just put my blinders on and stay focused on what I was doing. But what kind of ideas kind of came into your purview that really fascinated you and kind of stuck with you that maybe you hadn't begun to converse with before?
That's a good question. I think it's on spooky or the devil or what have you. That was, I knew things were in his music about that. A lot of times though, I looked at all the apocalypse kinds of things like he did and all the things he put in, right, regarding in terms of God and what have you. But I never looked at the other side of that in terms of the devil. And so his uses of, spooky and all kinds of things throughout his themes. Never really thought about that until I was reading one of the works of essays, and thinking, oh, I maybe missed a whole genre that this man had.
Exactly. You have these elements of demons and the demonic popping up through his lyrics periodically. And these are examples of things that we never put together in our minds, running as a thread through some of his songs. But one of our chapter authors, that's one example of it. Also, when I was indexing recently, I noticed just how much death was permeating all of his lyrics. It was so widespread. And so you look up death in the index, there's a lot of page numbers listed because as I kept looking, it was everywhere.
Yeah. And Jonathan, he works mostly on the index, and I kind of just looked through it, and I was just like, wow, this could, and the thing is, we probably could have more if we looked more too into it. But yeah, it's just amazing. So
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And so in thinking about that, then what is an unusual segment of maybe an audience that you hope comes across this book?
What struck me is we have one chapter that's referring specifically to a queer reading or listening of the Purple Rain album. We have another chapter that's all about looking at the indecent theology about his. And those two chapters are really tied together in some ways. So I think looking at, queer theology might be an interesting niche for some readers of the book. And even if they're not familiar with Prince, they might get a lot out of those two chapters specifically.
I agree with that, and I'll add on the Black liberation, or liberation theology, because I think some of these themes touch upon things that are going on in the world today, right? I mean, and things that need to be talked about. So I think, and also introducing to people maybe to terms they may have not known, like liberation theology, and kind of holding up other things like LGBTQI issues, right? Because that got mixed with Prince, in terms of his thoughts on a lot of things, and so, which was also very fluid in his life, because if you look at the body of people who are in and out of his life, and so I think that's one of the things is, in terms of hopefully, and I love generational, the kind of general, I'm thinking of that because I think of young adults, but I think of folks who are older. I think of church groups. I've been asked to speak to a group in the Catholic Church about this book. So you know what I'm saying? So it's just very interesting. And I think how we could cut across many lines of people.
I was thinking about with the death of Sally McFaig, how much of her work has been centered around body and embodiment, and how much Prince kind of carried that through, and with so much language and even TED Talks about shaming and body shaming elevated, that I think that's another part of this work that will be interesting for people because of his kind of holy sexuality that he carries. I mean, from his lifetime of work, and bringing that out of the shadows, I think. So tell us a little bit about some of the writers in the book.
I made some notes.
Yes,
so first of all, we have yourself, right?
Well, that's
so
me.
Yes. For those who don't know, Suzanne Castle is an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, correct? Okay.
That's right.
From Texas.
Lady
That's right. That's right.
We talked about Rev. Katrina Jenkins here as well, who's Dean of Religious Life here at Rollins College, where I'm also a librarian. We have
and Jonathan, right? I have to give kudos to the co-editor here because he made this all happen, but we are sitting in the library. So
that's cool.
Research is his thing. We're in his house, as we say.
I love that.
So let's see who else. We've got Rachel Harris. She's a doctoral student at Deakin University in Australia.
And then we have Zeta Johnson. She's like an anthropologist, in terms of an associate professor.
She works in urban community studies at Northeastern Illinois University.
And she's amazing. Everybody's been pretty amazing that we've been getting on this book.
Such a great team. Dr. Emily McGavin, who teaches creative writing at Victoria University in Australia.
And Stefan Serrata from Ontario, can you believe this? Who teaches American film history.
So cool.
And we've got Dr. Will Stockton, who's professor of English at Clemson University in South Carolina.
Erica Thompson, who is an award-winning journalist from Columbus, Ohio.
And she's writing her own book on Prince's spiritual journey. And actually, I saw her speak at the That Dance Symposium in Atlanta last spring. She's amazing.
Cool. And that will be fun. Her book take form, especially after this one.
And then lastly, we've got Dr. Joseph Trellinger, who is assistant professor of honors and philosophy at George Washington University.
What
really great
an amalgamation of disciplines, right? And I think that carries so much of who he was as an artist, which was engaging. I mean, I think just beyond musicology, engaging what people are thinking about and reading and writing and how their lens of looking at the world. And so kudos to you for kind of creating this creative team that looks at it through all of those lenses. That's amazing.
So we were fortunate. And I loved also bringing in your chapter, Suzanne, as an example of lived theology, right?
Right.
You weren't coming at this as an academic, but you were explaining how Prince's theology actually works in an actual congregation's life, which is really cool.
Yeah, I'm very blessed by a group of artists that hang out and do weird pop-ups throughout the community, and still to this day, and something will happen in culture and we say, all right, how do we then bring this into a greater understanding of the realm of God, the whole story of God and how it's being lived out in the world. And so thank you for even thinking that this would be part of this. I literally, when I saw the list of people and I went to the refuge cohort and I said, I just want you to know that the work that we're doing is alongside all these people. And I mean, everybody got goosebumps. And so it's pretty amazing work. And I hope that you're feeling that as kind of the inklings of this book get out into the mainstream.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell everybody a little bit more about how do they get this book? If it's not in their realm, like what do we need to do to get it out there? Like how do we get into Hollywood? I'm going to get into a Netflix executive's hands this week, I promise. And so how do we engage with people and get this book where they need it?
Cool. Good
It's
question.
really grassroots of what we've
Yes,
been
exactly.
doing.
A lot
So
of people have been helping us spread the word already.
yeah, I mean, between Facebook and Instagram and
Twitter.
Twitter and just basically all of our networks and what have you, like I have, my campus ministry or a chaplains association where I say, you need to buy this book. You need to buy this book. I mean, just friends, family. I mean,
Conferences, academic conference, other conferences coming up soon that Roman and Littlefield exhibits at as well. But also it's now listed on Amazon with a book cover finally, and also the Roman and Littlefield website. And we have a discount code that we're going to provide with this video, so you can get 30% off for a limited time only.
Yay.
Now, keep in mind, you're going to see a high cost of this book initially because it's put out in hardcover originally. But they have plans down the road to put it out as an ebook and as a paperback, which would be more affordable for some people.
That's
but
great.
Code, it cuts down to about 6.
Jonathan and I are always committed because working in academia, right? We know textbooks, students, and that's a conversation we have all the time here on our campus. So, our libraries are going to have a copy and what have you. So, trying to make it readable or put it in people's hands as much as we can.
Even if you can't buy it yourself, recommend it to your library.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I agree. And, I guess people know what they're getting for their Christmas gifts around my family this year.
It's interesting. So in one of our refuge people who kind of is our music director, her name is Amy Stewart, and she's been at Carnegie Hall and traveled with all sorts of people. But anyway, she now is the director of vocal jazz at Texas Christian University, and she teaches a musicology class that's rock and roll through the ages. It's like a music history and musicology really class. Good. And so she has asked for this for her birthday and Christmas present. So then she can add it to her list of books that she uses actually in her classroom. And I hope that there's more people that begin to kind of see this book as a resource for them in all sorts of different types of classes.
And being the first in a series, right?
Right.
I'm hoping that people will be able to grab on to this is pop culture and theology. I'm hoping to see this. In my former seminary, I went to Andover Newton, but they were teaching some fun courses. Not to say theology is not fun. I'm not trying to say that, but just theology and the arts, theology and music. Right. The other day, I went to a retreat. It was prayer. Well, one of the retreat topics was prayer music. And it wasn't all sacred music. I mean, there was some pop music, Celine Dion, Dion in it. There was like all kinds of things in that. So hopefully it will just get across everybody.
I think it's a wonderful project.
Yes. I want to put in a plug too, because I'm thinking about a new volume in this series too. I've already floated it by the series editor on theology and protest music. So I'm actively seeking someone, preferably with a doctorate, who might be interested in co-editing such a volume. I'd love to hear from them.
That would be fantastic. And I will connect with you after the fact because I think I have some resources for you in that realm. So yay. And I'm sure other people that are watching this might shoot you. So I'm going to put in the comments below the link to buy the book, the special promo code, and how to follow you on social media. But I understand that there is kind of an exciting playlist that people can see to get them excited about the music that's referenced in the book. Tell me more.
Well, you should mention that because it was your idea. But yes, we have a playlist on Spotify, Theology and Prince, in which each chapter author has chosen one song to represent their chapter. So we presented these 8 songs in chapter order. And some of them are fairly long, so even as an 8-song playlist, it's a good listen.
Also, we actually promoted on Prince's, Prince's Day, right, in June, and what have you, because we didn't do back birthdays towards especially again. But we previewed some music and talked a little bit about the book because, at that time it was basically done and we were trying to get into production.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, on our campus radio station, WPRK, since the year that he passed away. So we started on Prince Day that year, and every year we come up with an hour or 2 of his most obscure music to play on the radio, and we have a lot of that. Yeah.
I love that so much. In fact, on my list this morning, as I was prepping for this and listening and immersing myself in his music again, Computer Blue came up. And I had forgotten that the original version is like 8.5 minutes, you know, from, you know, and oh, it's so good. It's so good. So, well, I just want to thank you for your time and your energy and this project and inviting a diverse group to represent what Prince means and will mean for the future. And thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.